May 5th, 1945. The Austrian Alps, near the village of Vogel. Captain Jack Lee of the U.S. 12th Armored Division watched a German Wehrmacht major approach his Sherman tank, white flag in one hand, desperation on his face. The war was essentially over. Hitler had been dead for 5 days. Berlin had fallen. German forces were surrendering across Europe. Lee had spent the morning accepting surrenders from Wehrmacht soldiers who just wanted to go home. But this major wasn't surrendering. "Captain," the German said in heavily accented English, "I need your help. There are French prisoners at Castle Itter, very important people, former prime ministers. The SS is coming to kill them. My men and I, we will fight with you to save them." Lee stared at him. This had to be a trap. Germans didn't ask Americans for help. They certainly didn't offer to fight alongside them. "You want me to believe," Lee said slowly, "that you're a German officer asking American soldiers to help you fight other Germans?" "Not Germans," the major replied. "SS. They are fanatics. They will murder everyone in that castle. We cannot stop them alone. But together." Lee looked at his crew, at the war-weary faces of men who'd been fighting since Normandy, at this German major who was either telling the truth or setting up the most elaborate ambush in military history. He made a decision that would create the strangest battle of World War II. The only battle where Americans and Germans fought side by side. A battle featuring French prime ministers with rifles, a legendary tank making a last stand, and a German officer who would become a hero by taking a bullet meant for the enemy he'd spent years fighting. A battle so bizarre that for decades historians thought it was a myth. The castle, luxury prison for France's elite. Castle Itter perches on a hilltop in the Tyrolean Alps. Built in the 13th century, converted to a luxury hotel in the early 1900s. Stone walls, turrets, panoramic views of mountains and valleys. The kind of place that should have been hosting tourists, not prisoners. In 1943, the SS requisitioned it for a special purpose. Heinrich Himmler had a problem. The SS held thousands of important prisoners, political leaders, military commanders, aristocrats, intellectuals, people too prominent to simply execute but too dangerous to release. They needed somewhere secure to hold these prominents. Castle Itter became one of several luxury prisons for high-value captives. Remote location, easily guarded, comfortable enough that prisoners wouldn't die from neglect, but secure enough they couldn't escape. By May 1945, Castle Itter held some of the most important figures in recent French history. Edouard Daladier, Prime Minister of France when war was declared on Germany in September 1939. Hitler personally blamed him for starting the war. The Nazis considered him a war criminal. Paul Reynaud succeeded Daladier as Prime Minister in March 1940, refused to surrender when France was defeated, wanted to continue fighting from North Africa. The Germans arrested him when they occupied Vichy, France. Maurice Gamelin, Supreme Commander of French forces in 1940, blamed for France's catastrophic military defeat. The Germans kept him alive as a symbol of French incompetence. Maxime Weygand replaced Gamelin and negotiated the armistice with Germany. Despite cooperating with the occupation, he was still imprisoned. General Edouard Requin, senior French military officer. François de la Roque, founder of the Croix de Feu, a major French political movement in the 30s. Jean Barotre, famous tennis player and Vichy official. The bounding Basque, 4-time Wimbledon champion. Marie-Agnes Cailliau, sister of Charles de Gaulle, imprisoned solely because of her family connection to Free France's leader. Michel Clemenceau, son of Georges Clemenceau, France's prime minister during World War I, plus wives, family members, and other French military officers. 14 people total. These weren't random prisoners. These were people who'd shaped 20th century European history. Prime ministers, generals, political leaders, living symbols of France itself. The SS kept them in relative comfort, good food, comfortable rooms, books, games, even wine. But they were still prisoners. still hostages whose lives could end at any moment if the SS decided they were no longer useful. For 2 years, they lived in this surreal limbo, watching the war from their mountain prison, waiting, hoping the Allies would win before the SS decided to eliminate witnesses. By late April 1945, their worst fears were coming true. April 1945, a collapse. April 30th, 1945, Adolf Hitler committed suicide in his Berlin bunker. The 1,000-year Reich was dying after 12 years. German forces surrendered en masse. Entire armies laid down weapons. Officers abandoned posts. The Wehrmacht was dissolving. But not everyone surrendered. SS units, particularly the Waffen-SS, were true believers. They'd been indoctrinated in Nazi racial ideology since childhood. Surrender meant admitting everything they believed was a lie. Many SS units chose death over surrender. Others chose atrocities, executing prisoners, murdering civilians accused of defeatism, making suicidal last stands. At Castle Itter, the small SS detachment guarding the prisoners faced a choice: stay and eventually be captured by the Americans, flee and hope to escape prosecution. On May 2nd, the SS commander made his decision. He ordered his guards to abandon the castle. Just leave. The prisoners could fend for themselves. The SS guards departed on May 3rd. They took weapons, vehicles, supplies. They left the French prisoners locked in a castle in the middle of the Austrian Alps with no guards, no protection, and no way to communicate with the outside world. The prisoners were free and in mortal danger, because the SS hadn't just abandoned them. Nearby, the 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division, Gotz von Berlichingen, was making a last stand. A fanatical unit refusing to surrender, scattered across the Alps in small combat groups, fighting Americans, executing deserters, hunting traitors. And the 17th SS knew about Castle Itter. They knew who was imprisoned there. They considered the French prisoners collaborators and traitors who deserved execution. Former Prime Minister Daladier understood immediately. The SS will come for us, he told the others. They'll execute us as traitors or collaborators or for propaganda. We're witnesses to their crimes. We know too much. The prisoners barricaded doors, searched for weapons. They found a few old rifles the guards had left behind. 14 people, mostly middle-aged or elderly politicians and officers, preparing to defend a medieval castle against SS stormtroopers. They needed help, desperately. Andreas Krobot, the cook who became a hero. Andreas Krobot had been the castle cook for 2 years. Not a prisoner, not a guard, just a local Austrian hired to prepare meals. He'd developed relationships with the French prisoners, smuggled them news, passed messages, small acts of kindness that made their imprisonment slightly more bearable. When the SS guards abandoned the castle on May 3rd, Krobot realized what was happening. The prisoners were about to be murdered. He had to get help. Krobot had connections to the Austrian resistance. Nothing formal, just locals who quietly undermined Nazi control, hid deserters, sabotaged equipment, prepared for the moment Germany collapsed. On May 4th, Krobot slipped out of the castle and made his way to Vorgl, the nearest town about 4 miles away. He found Alois Meyer, a local resistance leader. The French prisoners at Itter, Krobot said. The SS abandoned them, but the 17th SS is in the area. They'll execute everyone if we don't help. Meyer understood immediately. For the Austrian resistance had no weapons, no training, no ability to defend a castle against SS troops. There's only one person who might help, Meyer said, but this conversation is going to be very difficult. He was talking about Major Josef Gangl, a German Wehrmacht officer, technically still the enemy. Major Josef Gangl, the German who chose honor. Josef Gangl was 36 years old, career Wehrmacht officer, joined the German army in 1929, fought in Poland, France, Yugoslavia, and Russia. Professional soldier who'd served his country for 16 years. But by May 1945, Gangle had a crisis of conscience. He'd watched the Nazi regime commit atrocities, watched SS units murder civilians, watched fanatics destroy Germany rather than accept defeat. He knew the war was lost. Knew continued fighting was pointless suicide that would only kill more people. Gangle had quietly made contact with the Austrian resistance weeks earlier. Not a dramatic defection, just a pragmatic officer who understood the war was over and wanted to minimize bloodshed. He had been passing information to the resistance, looking the other way when locals violated Nazi regulations, protecting deserters. He commanded about 10 Wehrmacht soldiers in Vorgel. All of them had abandoned their units, all technically deserters, hiding in town, waiting for American forces to arrive so they could surrender. When Meyer approached Gangle about Castle Itter, the major understood the situation immediately. If the SS reaches those prisoners, they'll execute them, Gangle said. This is exactly the kind of pointless atrocity they're committing everywhere. Can you help? Meyer asked. Gangle looked at his small group of deserters. 10 men, small arms, no heavy weapons, no vehicles. We can't defend a castle against an SS combat group, Gangle said, but I know who can. The Americans? Yes. If I can convince them this isn't a trap. It was an insane plan. Gangle was still technically an enemy officer. American forces might shoot him on sight. Even if they didn't, why would they trust a German officer with a wild story about French VIPs in a castle? But Gangle was out of options. Those French prisoners needed help. Only the Americans could provide it. I'll lead a white flag, Gangle said, and someone who speaks English better than I do. On May 4th, he sent a message through the resistance to approaching American forces. German officer requesting meeting under white flag. Urgent matter regarding French prisoners in danger. He had no idea if the Americans would even respond, or if they did, whether they'd believe him or shoot him as a trick. All he could do was wait. Captain Jack Lee, the tanker who took a chance. Captain Jack Lee commanded a unit of Sherman tanks from the 12th Armored Division's 23rd Tank Battalion. His tank, a Sherman M4, had a nickname painted on its side, Besotten Jenny. Lee was from Connecticut, joined the army before Pearl Harbor, fought across France, through Germany into Austria, competent officer, respected by his men. A kind of soldier who followed orders but used initiative when the situation demanded it. By May 5th, Lee's unit was in mop-up operations near the Austrian town of Kufstein, accepting surrenders, securing towns, dealing with the chaos of Germany's final collapse. When Lee received word that a German officer wanted to meet under white flag, his first instinct was suspicion. He'd heard about SS units faking surrenders, then ambushing Americans. But military protocol required meeting anyone under a white flag. Lee agreed to the meeting. He brought his tank and a squad of infantry. If this was an ambush, he'd be ready. May 5th, late morning. Major Gangle approached Lee's position, white flag clearly visible, accompanied by resistance leader Meyer and one of his Wehrmacht soldiers. Unarmed except for sidearms, Gangle saluted. A German military salute, not a Nazi salute. Professional soldier to professional soldier. Captain, Gangle said in halting English, I am Major Joseph Gangle, Wehrmacht. I have information about French prisoners in danger. Lee listened as Gangle explained. Castle Itter. 14 French VIPs, including 2 former prime ministers. SS guards abandoned them. 17th SS Panzergrenadier Division in the area, likely planning to execute the prisoners. And you want what exactly? Lee asked. I want to help you rescue them, Gangle said. My men and I will fight with you. Against the SS. Lee stared at him. You're asking American soldiers to trust German soldiers to fight other Germans. I'm asking you to help save innocent people from murder, Gangle replied. My men are deserters. We have abandoned the Nazi cause. The war is over, but the killing is not. The SS will execute those French prisoners. We cannot stop them alone, but together. Lee consulted with his superior officers by radio. The response was essentially, you're on the ground. Use your judgment. But we can't officially authorize Americans fighting alongside Germans. Lee looked at Gangle. at this German major who was risking execution as a traitor by approaching American forces, at the Austrian resistance members who'd risked their lives to get help. Every military instinct said this could be a trap. But Lee's gut said something else. This German officer was telling the truth. "How many men do you have?" Lee asked. 10, plus Austrian resistance, perhaps 5 or 6. Weapons? Rifles, 1 machine gun, small arms. Against how many SS? Unknown. Reports suggest between 100 and 150 in the area. Perhaps 50 will attack the castle. Lee did the math. His tank, maybe 15 American soldiers he could take. 10 Germans. A handful of Austrians. Against 50 or more SS fanatics. Terrible odds. Probably a suicide mission. But if Gangel was telling the truth, former French prime ministers were about to be executed. That would be an international scandal. A stain on the Allied victory. "All right," Lee said. "But we do this my way, I command. You follow my orders. Your men follow my orders. First sign of treachery, I'll kill you myself. Clear?" Gangel saluted again. "Perfectly clear, Captain. Thank you." Lee radioed his commanders. "I'm taking Bissot and Jenny in a relief force to Castle Itter. German deserters are joining us. I'll report when we have the situation secured. Lee out." Strangest alliance of World War II had just been formed. The approach, Americans and Germans together. May 5th, early afternoon. The combined force moved toward Castle Itter. Captain Lee and Bissot and Jenny with his tank crew. 14 American infantry soldiers. Major Gangel with 10 Wehrmacht soldiers. 5 Austrian resistance members, including Alois Meyer. Approximately 35 men total, heading to defend a castle against an unknown number of SS fanatics. The journey was surreal. American and German soldiers traveling together, not as captors and prisoners, as allies. Some of Lee's men were deeply uncomfortable. Private Ed Shimchik had fought Germans since Normandy. Now he was supposed to trust them? "Captain," Shimchik said, "how do we know this isn't a trap? How do we know these Germans won't shoot us in the back?" Lee looked at Gangel, riding on the back of the Sherman. "Major, you want to answer that?" Gangel addressed the American soldiers in his broken English. "I understand you do not trust us. We have been enemies. But today we fight the same enemy. The SS are fanatics. They murder civilians. They execute prisoners. They destroy Germany rather than accept defeat. We are soldiers, not murderers. Today we are soldiers together." Not everyone was convinced, but they were committed now. The force reached Castle Itter around 3 in the afternoon. The French prisoners were astonished. Edouard Daladier, who as prime minister had declared war on Germany in 1939, looked out the window and saw an American tank. Relief washed over him. They were saved. Then he saw Wehrmacht soldiers alongside the Americans. Confusion replaced relief. What was happening? Lee and Gangel entered the castle together. The sight was extraordinary. An American captain and a German major walking side by side, approaching 2 former French prime ministers. Lee explained, "Gentlemen, we're here to protect you. The SS is coming. We're going to defend this castle. I need you to take cover in the most secure parts of the building and stay away from windows." Paul Reynaud, who'd refused to surrender France to Germany and spent 5 years as a prisoner, stared at Gangel. "Your Wehrmacht?" "Yes, Monsieur Prime Minister," Gangel replied in French. "But today I fight for you." Daladier extended his hand. Gangel shook it. 2 men who'd been mortal enemies, whose countries had slaughtered each other's soldiers, shaking hands before a battle where they'd fight side by side. The surreal nature of the moment wasn't lost on anyone, but there was no time for philosophical reflection. The SS were coming. The defense. Preparing for the impossible. Castle Itter wasn't designed for modern warfare. Medieval fortress updated in the 19th century. Good defensive position on a hilltop, but not fortified against sustained assault by determined infantry. Lee assessed the tactical situation. Advantages: elevated position, narrow approach roads, stone walls providing cover, single main gate creating a natural choke point. Disadvantages: only 1 armored vehicle, limited ammunition, small defensive force, no artillery support, no reinforcements available, no air support. The plan was simple. Position Bissott and Jenny at the main gate to cover the bridge and approach road. American and German riflemen at windows and walls covering all approaches. Austrian resistance members as runners and spotters. French prisoners sheltered in the most secure interior rooms. But there was an immediate complication. The French prisoners didn't want to hide. General Maurice Gamelin stepped forward. "Captain, I was Supreme Commander of French forces. I know how to use a rifle." General Maxime Weygand nodded. "As do I. We will fight." Former Prime Minister Reynaud. "I will not hide in a cellar while others die defending me." Even John Barotra, the tennis champion, wanted to fight. "I can shoot," he said. Lee was reluctant. These were VIPs, former heads of government. If they were killed defending themselves, it would be an international incident. But Gangle quietly said, "Captain, they are soldiers. They have a right to defend themselves." Lee compromised. The French with military experience could carry weapons and defend from windows, but they'd stay inside, not expose themselves unnecessarily. Meanwhile, Lee positioned his forces. Bissott and Jenny at the main gate, hull-down position covering the bridge and approach road. The tank's 75 gun and machine guns could devastate any frontal assault. American infantry covering the east and south walls. German Wehrmacht soldiers covering the north and west walls. Austrian resistance members as runners, carrying messages between positions. This arrangement meant Americans and Germans were literally fighting side by side. American riflemen to the left of a window, German riflemen to the right, sharing ammunition, coordinating fields of fire. Sergeant Bill Elliott found himself next to a German soldier who introduced himself as Wegscheider. They couldn't speak each other's language. They communicated with hand signals. Wegscheider pointed to a tree line. Elliott nodded. Both aimed their rifles. Inside the castle, former Prime Minister Daladier took a position at a window with a rifle. Next to him, German soldier Hans Waltel checked his machine gun. 5 years earlier, these two men's countries were slaughtering each other. Now they were preparing to fight together. Around 4 in the afternoon, Austrian resistance scouts reported movement. SS forces approaching from the north. Estimated strength, 40 to 60 men. No heavy weapons visible, but they might have mortars or Panzerfausts. Lee addressed everyone. "When they come, they'll come hard. SS don't retreat. They fight until they're dead or we are. Stay in your positions. Watch your fields of fire. Don't waste ammunition. We hold until relief arrives." "When will relief arrive?" someone asked. Lee didn't answer, because he'd requested reinforcements, but he had no idea when or if they'd come. The American forces in the area were scattered, accepting surrenders, dealing with chaos. Castle Itter was one problem among hundreds. They might be on their own. Around 5:30 in the afternoon, the SS attacked. The first assault, testing the defenses. The SS 17th Panzer Grenadier Division troops who attacked Castle Itter weren't typical German soldiers. These were fanatics, teenagers and men in their early 20s. Many had Hitler Youth backgrounds, true believers who'd rather die than surrender. Their commander, whose name was never definitively recorded, understood tactics. He wouldn't waste men in a suicidal frontal assault. He'd probe the defenses, identify weak points, then concentrate forces. The first attack came from the north, where tree cover extended close to the castle walls. Approximately 15 SS soldiers advanced through the woods, using terrain and cover, professional infantry tactics. German soldier Waltel spotted them first. "Movement, north wall, 200 meters. Lee looked through binoculars. SS troops in camouflage smocks moving tactically through trees. "Hold fire," Lee ordered. "Let them get closer." The SS advanced to within 100 meters. They were checking the defenses, looking for reactions, identifying firing positions. "Now," Lee ordered. American and German rifles opened fire simultaneously. The coordinated volley caught the SS troops in the open. 3 went down immediately. The others dove for cover. The SS returned fire. Machine gun bursts raked the castle walls. Bullets pinged off stone. Ships of masonry exploded. Inside, former Prime Minister Daladier fired his rifle at an SS soldier taking cover behind a tree. He missed, fired again. The soldier moved. Next to him, German soldier Waltel fired a sustained burst from his machine gun. Tracers arced toward the tree line. An SS soldier trying to reposition was hit and went down. This was the moment of truth. Would Americans and Germans really fight together? Or would old instincts take over? Sergeant Elliott's rifle jammed. He swore, trying to clear it. The German soldier next to him, Wegscheider, immediately moved to cover Elliott's sector, firing at SS troops who were trying to exploit the gap. Elliott cleared his jam and resumed firing. He and Wegscheider exchanged a nod. No words needed. The first SS assault lasted 15 minutes. When they withdrew, they'd lost at least 4 killed and several wounded. The defenders had taken no casualties. But Lee knew this was just reconnaissance in force. The real attack was coming. The main assault, Besotten Jenny's stand. Around 7 in the evening, the SS commander committed his main force. Approximately 40 SS troops attacked from multiple directions simultaneously. North and east side. Classic infantry tactics fix the enemy in place with frontal assault while flanking forces find weak points. But the main effort was against the gate where Besotten Jenny was positioned. 20 SS troops advanced down the road toward the bridge and castle gate. They had Panzerfausts, German anti-tank weapons. Their plan was clear: destroy the American tank, breach the gate, storm the castle. Lee saw them coming. Besotten Jenny, targets on the road, fire when ready. The Sherman's 75 mm gun fired. High explosive shell. It detonated in the middle of the SS formation. Bodies flew. Survivors scattered. The tank's .30 caliber machine guns opened up. Tracers poured down the road. SS soldiers dove for ditches and cover. But they kept coming. This was the SS. Retreat wasn't an option. One SS soldier got close enough to fire a Panzerfaust. The rocket-propelled grenade streaked toward Besotten Jenny. It hit the front glacis plate, the thickest armor. The shaped charge detonated. Inside, the crew felt the impact. Ears rang. But the armor held. Lee's gunner traversed the turret and fired the main gun again. Another high-explosive round. Another group of SS troops devastated. The coaxial machine gun hammered away. Spent shell casings piled up inside the tank. But the tank was taking damage. Small arms fire cracked against the hull. Another Panzerfaust hit. This one against the turret. It didn't penetrate, but the explosion damaged the main gun's traverse mechanism. Main gun stuck, the gunner shouted. Use the machine guns, Lee ordered. Meanwhile, SS troops were probing the north and east walls where American and German infantry were positioned. An SS soldier threw a grenade toward a window where American Private Shemchik was firing. The grenade fell short, exploded harmlessly. Shemchik ducked back, reloaded. The German soldier next to him, Gangel's man, Pollock, leaned out and fired. Hit an SS trooper trying to advance. On the south wall, former Prime Minister Paul Reynaud fired carefully aimed shots with a rifle. His military experience was decades old, but muscle memory returned. Aim, breathe, squeeze. An SS soldier went down. Reynaud didn't know if he'd hit him or if someone else had. Didn't matter. He chambered another round. Tennis champion Jean Barotra wasn't at a window. He'd volunteered for the most dangerous job, runner, carrying messages between positions when radio wasn't available. He sprinted across the courtyard as bullets cracked overhead, delivered ammunition to a position running low, ran back. Athletic training from years of competitive tennis, saving his life as he dodged through crossfire. The battle raged for over an hour. The SS couldn't break through. Every approach was covered. Every assault was repulsed. But the defenders were running low on ammunition. Besotten Jenny had expended most of its machine gun ammo. The riflemen were down to their last magazines. Lee knew they couldn't hold much longer. We need reinforcements, now. He'd been radioing for relief since the battle started. But American forces in the area were scattered. Everything was a chaos. No one was available. They were on their own. The sacrifice, Gangel's last stand. Around 8:30 in the evening, the SS tried a different tactic. They'd infiltrated close to the castle walls during the chaos of the main assault. Now a small group, maybe 6 soldiers, rushed the main gate from the blind spot next to Besotten Jenny. The tank couldn't depress its guns enough to hit them. They were too close in the tank's dead zone. Major Gangle saw them from a window. They had satchel charges, explosives meant to blow the gate. If they succeeded, the SS would pour through. Gangle grabbed his rifle and ran, not toward cover, toward the gate. "Gangle, no!" Lee shouted from the tank. But Gangle was already there, firing at the SS troops near the gate. He hit one, hit another, drove them back from the gate. Former Prime Minister Paul Reynaud watched from a window, saw Gangle exposed at the gate, saw an SS soldier raise his rifle aiming at Gangle's back. Reynaud didn't think. He just moved, leaned out the window. "Major, down." Gangle turned, saw the SS soldier aiming, started to move. The SS rifle cracked. The bullet hit Gangle in the head. He dropped instantly. Reynaud fired at the SS soldier, missed. German soldier Voltel fired from the next window. The SS soldier went down, but it was too late. Major Joseph Gangle was dead, killed defending the man whose country he'd fought against for years, killed saving French prisoners he had no obligation to protect, killed doing what he believed was right. Captain Lee saw it happen. For a moment, the battle seemed to freeze. This German major, who'd risked everything to save enemy prisoners, who'd fought alongside Americans against his own countrymen, who'd chosen honor over ideology, was dead. "Covering fire," Lee shouted. "Get him inside." 2 American soldiers and 1 German soldier braved enemy fire. They dragged Gangle's body back into the castle. Paul Reynaud, former Prime Minister of France, helped carry Gangle inside. Tears streamed down his face. This German officer had died saving him. The battle continued. But something had changed. Gangle's death crystallized what everyone was fighting for. Not countries, not ideologies, not politics. They were fighting for each other. Americans, Germans, French, Austrians. Fighting against fanatics who'd rather murder than accept defeat. The final assault. Desperate hours. By 9 in the evening, the situation was critical. Besotten Jenny was out of ammunition for the main gun and nearly out of machine gun ammo. The tank had taken multiple Panzerfaust hits. It wasn't going anywhere. The defenders were down to a few magazines each. No grenades, no heavy weapons. Casualties mounting. 2 American soldiers wounded. 3 German soldiers dead, including Gangle. 1 Austrian resistance member killed. The SS attacked again. They knew the defenders were weakening. 1 more push might do it. 20 SS troops assaulted the east wall, firing from cover, throwing grenades, trying to suppress the defenders long enough to get ladders against the wall. American and German soldiers fired their last ammunition. Former French generals fired rifles until they had no bullets left. An SS soldier reached the wall with a ladder, started climbing. Jean Barotra, the tennis champion, was nearby. No rifle, no bullets. He grabbed a piece of rubble and threw it, hit the SS soldier in the face. The soldier fell. Inside Besotten Jenny, Lee made a decision. We're abandoning the tank. Everyone inside the castle, make a stand at the interior keep. The tank crew, evacuated, ran for the castle entrance. Bullets chased them. They made it. The SS poured fire at the castle. Windows shattered. Stone chips flew. The defenders huddled in interior rooms, waiting for the final assault. This was it. The end. They'd fought as hard as they could, done everything possible. But they were out of ammunition, out of time, out of options. And they heard it. The sound of engines, big engines, multiple vehicles. Through the smoke and chaos, shapes appeared on the road. Sherman tanks, American tanks, multiple tanks. Relief had arrived. The relief, salvation at the last moment. The American Relief Force, elements of the 12th Armored Division that had finally gotten Lee's messages, arrived at 9:15 in the evening. 4 Sherman tanks, 2 companies of infantry, over 150 men. The SS forces saw them coming and broke. Fanatics or not, they weren't suicidal. They couldn't fight multiple tanks with infantry support. They melted into the woods. The battle for Castle Itter was over. Captain Lee emerged from the castle. His uniform was torn, face blackened with smoke. He met the relief force commander. "You took your sweet time," Lee said. "Had to fight through scattered resistance. You okay?" "We held. Lost some good men, including a German major who saved everyone in that castle." The relief force commander looked at Lee like he'd lost his mind. "A German major." "Long story," Lee said. "I'll explain later. Right now we need medics and ammo and a perimeter in case the SS come back." Inside the castle, the French prisoners were safe, exhausted, traumatized, but alive. Paul Reynaud stood over Gangler's body. This German officer had died saving him, had taken a bullet that might have been meant for Reynaud, had sacrificed everything. Edouard Daladier stood next to him, two former prime ministers of France, mourning a German Wehrmacht major. "We will tell his story," Reynaud said quietly. "The world will know what he did." "Will they believe it?" Daladier asked. "Probably not, but we will tell it anyway." The aftermath, a battle erased from history. The Battle of Castle Itter ended on May 5th, 1945. The French prisoners were evacuated the next day, returned to France as heroes, resumed their lives and political careers. Captain Jack Lee received the Distinguished Service Cross for his actions. Several of his men received medals. The official citation mentioned rescuing French prisoners from SS forces, but carefully omitted any mention of fighting alongside German soldiers. The German Wehrmacht soldiers who'd fought at Castle Itter were treated as prisoners of war. They were detained briefly, then released. Most returned to their families and tried to rebuild their lives in shattered post-war Germany. Josef Gangl was buried with military honors, not by the Wehrmacht, by the Austrian resistance and the town of Vorgl. Years later, a street was named after him. A memorial was erected. The Austrian government recognized him as a hero who chose honor over blind obedience. But for decades, the story of Castle Itter was barely mentioned in official histories. Why? Several reasons. Political embarrassment. How do you explain that Americans and Germans fought together? The war narrative was clear. Allies good, Nazis bad. Nuanced stories about good Germans and American-German cooperation complicated that narrative. Cold War politics. After the war, West Germany became a crucial American ally against the Soviet Union. Emphasizing German atrocities and American-German combat kept the focus on the Soviet threat. Stories about good Germans fighting bad Germans were less useful. Complexity. The Battle of Castle Itter didn't fit neat categories. It wasn't a conventional battle. It wasn't a liberation. It was a weird alliance defending French VIPs against SS fanatics. Historians didn't know how to categorize it. Lack of documentation. The battle happened during Germany's collapse. Official records were incomplete or non-existent. Most documentation came from participant testimony, which seemed too bizarre to be true. For decades, Castle Itter was a footnote, mentioned occasionally in French memoirs, known to military history enthusiasts, but largely forgotten. It wasn't until historian Stephen Harding published The Last Battle in 2013 that the full story reached a wider audience. Harding meticulously documented the battle using participant testimonies, military records, and archival research. Even then, many people assumed it was fiction. Americans and Germans fighting together. A Sherman tank defending a medieval castle. French prime ministers with rifles. It sounded like a bad movie plot. But it happened. Every word of it. The participants, where are they now? Captain Jack Lee returned to the United States, left the army, lived quietly in Connecticut, rarely discussed Castle Itter. He died in 1997. His family said he considered it just another battle. He did his job, saved lives, went home. The French prisoners returned to France as heroes. Daladier and Reynaud resumed political careers. Gamelin and Weygand retired. All of them spoke about Gangel's sacrifice. All insisted the story be told, even if people didn't believe it. The German Wehrmacht soldiers disappeared into post-war Germany. Most never spoke publicly about Castle Itter. In post-war Germany, admitting you'd fought for Germany, even against the SS, was complicated. Andreas Krobot, the cook who started everything, returned to his normal life, recognized by the French government for his role in saving the prisoners. He died in 1977. Alois Meyer, the Austrian resistance leader, remained in Vogel, helped establish the memorial to Gangel, died in 1990. Besot and Jenny, the Sherman tank that defended the gate. It was damaged but repairable. After the war, it was scrapped. Nothing remains of it today, just photographs and memories. Josef Gangel, buried in Vogel Cemetery, a street named after him, Major Gangelstrasse, a memorial plaque, recognized by Austria as a hero. His family received honors from the French government. His story is taught in Austrian schools as an example of moral courage. The lessons, what Castle Itter teaches us. The Battle of Castle Itter is more than a weird historical footnote. It teaches several important lessons. Enemies are not monolithic. Not all Germans were Nazis. Not all Wehrmacht soldiers were war criminals. Gangel and his men were career soldiers who chose honor over ideology when it mattered most. War is complicated. The simple narrative of good guys versus bad guys breaks down when you examine individual battles. Castle Itter featured Germans saving French prisoners from other Germans with American help. Reality is messier than propaganda. Courage transcends nationality. Gangel took a bullet for French prisoners. American soldiers fought alongside Germans they'd been killing days earlier. Tennis champion Borotra risked his life as a runner. Former prime ministers picked up rifles. Courage isn't about nationality, it's about choosing right when it matters. The SS represented ideology's end state. The SS troops attacking Castle Itter were true believers. They'd rather murder prisoners than accept defeat. They'd rather die than surrender. That's what ideological fanaticism produces. People who choose violence over reason. Small actions matter. Andreas Krobot was just a cook, but his decision to get help saved 14 lives. Gangel was just a major commanding 10 deserters. But his decision to help created one of the war's most remarkable stories. History is stranger than fiction. If someone wrote Castle Itter as a screenplay, it would be rejected as unrealistic. Americans and Germans teaming up. French prime ministers in a firefight. A tennis champion dodging bullets. Too bizarre to be believable. But it happened. The myth and the reality. Over the years, the Castle Itter story has been embellished. Myths have grown around the battle. Myth. Hundreds of SS troops attacked the castle. Reality. Probably 40 to 60. Still dangerous, but not the massive force some accounts claim. Myth. The defenders were almost out of ammunition when relief arrived. Reality, they were low on ammo, but not completely out. They could have fought a bit longer if necessary. Myth. Gangel died heroically charging an SS position. Reality, he was shot while defending the gate. Heroic, but not a dramatic charge. Just a soldier doing his duty. Myth. The French prisoners were all elderly politicians who couldn't fight. Reality, several were experienced military officers. They fought competently with rifles. Myth. This was the only time Americans and Germans fought together in World War II. Reality, there were a few other minor instances, but Castle Itter is the most significant and best documented. The real story is remarkable enough without embellishment. You don't need myths when the truth is already extraordinary. Conclusion. The Impossible Alliance. May 5th, 1945. A German major waved a white flag at an American tank. He didn't want to surrender. He wanted to team up. Captain Jack Lee made a decision that military doctrine said was insane. He trusted an enemy officer. He brought American soldiers to fight alongside German deserters. He defended French VIPs in a medieval castle against SS fanatics. The Battle of Castle Itter lasted approximately 5 hours. Approximately 75 combatants, American, German, French, Austrian, defended against 40 to 60 SS troops. When it was over, the French prisoners were safe. Major Joseph Gangl was dead. Pisotten Jenny was damaged, but had done its job. The impossible alliance had held. For decades, the story was barely told. Too weird, too complicated. Didn't fit the narrative. But it happened. Every incredible, unbelievable detail. Americans and Germans fighting side by side. Former enemies become temporary allies. A German officer dying to save French prisoners. A tennis champion dodging bullets. Prime ministers with rifles. A Sherman tank making a last stand at a castle gate. Strangest battle of World War II. And proof that even in the worst war in human history, individuals could choose honor over hatred, courage over ideology, and humanity over nationalism. Joseph Gangl could have stayed hidden. Let the Americans handle it. Saved his own life. Instead, he chose to do what was right. And he paid with his life. That's the lesson of Castle Itter. Not that war is glorious or battles are noble, but that individuals, even in impossible circumstances, can choose to be better than the worst parts of human nature. On May 5th, 1945, in a castle in the Austrian Alps, that's exactly what happened. Americans, Germans, French, and Austrians fighting together, saving lives, proving that humanity can transcend even the most terrible conflicts. The battle for Castle Itter, the impossible alliance, the strangest battle of World War II, and one of the most inspiring.